on to Julie now because we're running over a bit. Julie,
Thank
please.
you very much, Chair.
Yep.
Chancellor, the week before you announced the Energy Profits Levy, in the Chamber you said that you do not believe that windfall taxes are the simple and easy answer to every problem. What changed your mind?
No, I don't believe. I still believe what I said then. I don't think they're the knee-jerk response that one should always reach for in situations like this. But as I said, I'm pragmatic about their use, and I think if you have a situation where, as we do here, there are companies that are making extraordinary profits in large part as a result of a war, then it's reasonable to think, well, actually, we should tax those profits fairly. So I think that is a reasonable approach. But I think you want to be thoughtful about it, and the thing that I've always said consistently is the thing that is in my mind is investment, and making sure that you try and tax those profits fairly, but do so in a way that continues to support investment, because that's something that I think it's good for jobs, it's good for the economy, and in this instance, it's good for energy security. So we took the time to design a levy that was not as blunt an instrument as some which others have suggested, and contains a very generous incentive to invest included within it, which I think gets that balance right between raising money fairly but also incentivising investment.
We mentioned extraordinary profits. During COVID, there were times when actually the sector was making, you might call, extraordinary losses. We don't subsidise the sector in those circumstances. So is it right that we should then tax profits?
Yeah, I think back in 2016 around, I've put it in here sometime, at a time when the oil price went back down to about $40, I think, Harriet might remember, I can't remember if she was at the Treasury then, but actually back then, I think it was Philip Hammond probably who put in place a range of things that did beneficially improve the tax regime for all these companies in reflection of the fact that oil prices at that point everyone thought were stuck at $40 for a very lower for longer, I think was the refrain that you heard. So I don't think it's not completely right to say that we haven't made changes in the other direction when prices have gone lower. The government has in the past done that. But I said, look, there's a range of what one might consider relatively normal ups and downs of commodity cycles. These prices are particularly high, and they're high in part driven by a war, and I think it was reasonable, therefore, to take this pragmatic approach. But so do so in a way that supports investment.
Thank you. I mean, there's another aspect that most of the profits from companies like BP and Shell are actually not made in the North Sea. So there's a case to saying actually the windfall profits are actually being taxed twice. So they're being made elsewhere, and then we're taxing them twice, actually.
No, that's not. This tax regime, we have a very specific UK tax regime that's been in place for decades, which applies specifically to the UK continental shelf, if I'm getting the terminology right, to the extraction of, I see Angela nodding as well, so good, I probably have got that right. It applies, well, we've got all these former Treasury ministers, so keep me on my toes. But it applies very specifically to the activities of fossil fuel extraction in that in there. So it's a very ring-fenced regime for that, and doesn't apply to profits they make elsewhere. They or any other companies.
Thank you. Is it fair to have excluded, to say that companies can't offset their losses from this particular tax as well? Is that fair?
Yes, it's something that we've done similarly in the past with, for example, the bank levy works in the same way, the residential developer property tax works in the same way. Because if what you're trying to do is to tax genuinely excess profits, it wouldn't be reasonable, I don't think, or it would undermine the policy rationale of that, to then allow losses which had nothing to do that to be offset against it. I don't know, Dan, if you want to add anything on that.
No, I mean, that's exactly right. We did that in various things that were done with the corporation tax regime for banks, where the carry forward of losses was excluded from being set against the additional corporation tax, and the other bits of the North Sea regime, so the sort of 30% ring-fence corporation tax rate and the supplementary charge allow carry forward, but this additional 25% on top won't allow carry forward for the reasons the Chancellor said.
Okay, thank you. You've said that the levy will fall away when prices return to normal. Can you define normal?
Yeah, that's a conversation we're having with the industry as well. I think the last time this was done, a price target was published, which was $74, $75 for Brent. Now, if you look, So there's kind of one benchmark there. I think that if you look at the average Brent price over the last, say, 5 or 10 years, that would give you a number of something like $60 or $70 oil. If you look at what most of these companies communicate to their shareholders and what they consider to be normalized oil prices, so what are they telling their own investors? They tend to use numbers like $60, 70 in that range as well. So that give you a sense. That's kind of give you a sense. I think we want to make sure that it is. We've got a complicated situation. We've got gas and oil, so we need to think a little bit about that. And then to provide reassurance that this is not meant to be a permanent feature of the tax regime, there will be a sunset clause of just over 3 years in the legislation itself as a backstop. But obviously, if prices come back to the range that I've discussed, then you would expect this to fall away sooner.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Julie. Gareth, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to carry on the conversation about the levy and